Hello, and welcome to episode number 9 of the Art Inside the Craft podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Glazier, and today's guest, Kirk West, has a fantastic number of stories to tell about photographing musicians and Chicago blues players in the early 1970s, becoming the tour manager and photographer for the Allman Brothers Band, establishing the Allman Brothers Museum called the Big House, which is in Macon, Georgia, and many other pivotal contributions that wouldn't have happened without this incredible Iowa native. Through his carefree storytelling, he fills in some of the incredible history he shares during the past 40 years with the Allman Brothers Band and how exactly he was able to acquire and open up his biggest gift to Allman Brothers fans, the Big House Museum. Let's listen in on that interview right now.
The moment you called, the band's manager called. We're working on a couple projects, and I put him off. So we're on. Here we
go. Okay, well, I appreciate that. So I don't know if I've told you, but I write for a couple of different online places, as well as having my own website, and I kind of, dabble in photography, and I really wanted to talk to you since, and I don't know if you remember, but I came over to the blues and black and white thing you did in Chicago at Chess Records.
Okay.
We met really briefly there. Yeah, I was a supporter of the Kickstarter, supporter of the book, so I mean, I obviously just love your work and everything that you've done with the Allman Brothers. So
Thank you.
I kind of wanted to start with, obviously the one thing we have in common is both Iowa roots, and I believe from looking some of your information up that your first camera was a Kodak Brownie. I kind of wanted to find out, how did you go from that, living in Iowa, to covering really all the amazing music and I guess heading over towards Chicago to do the work you did over there?
Well, my grandmother gave me that. It wasn't even a real Kodak Brownie. It was a little knockoff of that sort of thing. It was a green plastic camera that my grandma gave me when I was 10 years old. And so, at that time, I just kind of photographed whatever caught my eye. I was photographing my life. At that time, it was all about model cars, building hot rod model cars and stuff like that. And then I got a little older, and I got a little bit better camera. And I got real hot rods instead of model cars. And it was, at that time, I grew up in a little town called Nevada, which is just east of Ames by about 10 miles, 30 miles, 35 miles north of Des Moines.
You bet.
The jobs in that little town of 3,000 people, there was only about 4 jobs that little gearheads cared about, and that was working at the Ford dealer or the Chevy dealer or the Chrysler dealer or the Standard Oil gas station. Those are the only 4 jobs that little gearheads really cared about. And I got lucky and got a job as the car wash kid at the Chrysler dealership. Wow. And the son of the owner was a drag racer. I guess he was probably 8 years older than me. He was probably early 20s when I was in my teens. And so I was their little gopher guy. I'd go out to the drag strip races with him, and they taught me how to work on hot rods. And they were a successful drag race team, and I'd shoot pictures. And the local paper bought a couple, and I made $10 a picture, and, it was a big deal. Huh. And but I knew that the world was exploding. This was 1967, 1968. I knew that the world was rocking, and little Nevada, Iowa wasn't. So at the night that I smoked any reefer for the very first time, my first smoking a joint with a bunch of buddies of mine, at somebody's farmhouse. Their parents were out of town, so we had a little party. And somebody put on, and this is 66, 67. So, psychedelic music was shaking, but somebody put on the Paul Butterfield Blues album.
Oh, yes.
And it changed my life. It turned my ass inside out. There was no blues scene, I didn't even know anything about that, and Butterfield turned me inside out. So over the course of the next couple of years, I knew that Chicago is where I wanted to end up. And so I got out of high school, enrolled in Iowa State, and went to Iowa State for about 3 months and quit and moved to Chicago. And this was in the summer of '68. And, I mean, shit, everything was kicking. I learned, I still had my hot rod. I had 1951 Henry J that I had built while working at the Chrysler dealership, and I had a Chrysler engine in and push button transmission, and I was a real little gearhead, and I got to Chicago with this hot rod, and I painted it orange and called it the Speed Freak, and but my attention turned from scooping the loop on Saturday nights to going into Chicago. I was living in the suburbs up near Wisconsin, and going into Chicago to see concerts on the weekends. And so it gradually just kind of evolved from hot rods to shooting musicians. And but at the time, I was just shooting my life like I'd always done, just taking pictures of my life like people do. And I had a pretty good eye, and so little by little it all kind of unfolded, and I became very involved in attending concerts. I wasn't really, I'd take a camera sometimes and not other times, and it was not it was more of a hobby, but it wasn't even a committed hobby. It was just something I did. And wasn't until, and I went through all kinds of trouble with, like kids do, getting high, getting too high, getting busted, doing little lightweight crimes and stuff like that. And but about 1973, I guess it would have been, about 5 years, I'd floated around, gone from Chicago to San Francisco and back, and then Colorado and back, and was getting ready to head to Florida. I have always kept coming back to Chicago. I'd go to these places that were, places that I'd read about, that I heard about, that were beautiful places. And I'd go to these places, and oftentimes it was too cool, and I wouldn't accomplish nothing. And I kind of, in the long run, it ended up that Chicago was the right combination of inspiration and aggravation. And so once I quit doing all the dope and stuff, my photography got quite a bit better, surprisingly. If you can focus your eyes, you're more likely to be able to focus the camera. And so about 1977, I'd been living in Florida when I got clean and sober. Started shooting some stuff down there with a seriousness about it. And the Allman Brothers had broken up. They had been my favorite band. I had gotten to know them casually because I always had a pocket full of this or that. So they were always glad to see me.
Sure.
And but I got clean up down south, and I'd have great pictures, but they'd just be occasional. I'd have my head right, and I'd go to shoot a concert, and everything would turn out great. And then the next time I'd go, I'd be too pie-eyed. So it was a hit and miss kind of deal from a professional standpoint, and I wasn't a professional. The first time I really got into selling my photography with any kind of seriousness was the summer of '74, and shot a lot of Grateful Dead shows. And, it was the beginning of that whole shakedown street kind of mindset. And
sure.
So I'd print up a bunch of pictures and take them to the next show and sell them in the parking lot, and it's like selling. It was like selling an avocado sandwich, only you could put it on the wall.
Yeah.
So that kind of unfolded, and then I moved back to Chicago in '77, and really had a pretty good head that I really wanted to try to make photography my business, my career. So I ended up going to work at a photo lab and doing a couple little things here and there, and learned that I could make money with photography, but I hadn't quite figured out how to make money shooting music. And I hooked up with a couple guys when I got back to Chicago in '77, and they had a little co-op, and it wasn't anybody's real business. It was like one phone number and half a dozen photographers. And So we all had our little areas of interest. One of the guys liked big gaudy stuff like Kiss and Alice Cooper, and another guy liked jazz, and I liked country and blues.
Yeah.
And there was a guy that shot nothing but blues. So we all kind of found our little niche, and everybody made a little living. Most of us were working in photo labs or something. You needed a real job. Plus it also gave you access to the best equipment in town.
Yeah.
So, that whole kind of thing kind of evolved and started making a decent income, and gradually quit working in labs and shooting the occasional album cover and doing a lot of publicity stuff for local bands and shooting stuff for newspapers and local magazines and that sort of thing. Along those times, the brothers got back together. I'd gotten real into knowing Dickie and Greg really well. I'd stay at their place in Florida, or they'd stay at my place in Chicago, and I got to know the blues scene really, really well. And so all that stuff kind of gradually, organically unfolded. And then in '88. And Polygram Records. This was the era of the beginning of everything being on CDs instead of vinyl. So Polygram Records had just put out a box set called Crossroads, which was a 4 CD compilation of Eric Clapton's career. And Polygram, through some legal bankruptcy issues, had taken charge of all of the Capricorn Records catalog.
Oh, wow.
And so all the master tapes to all that stuff, Marshall Tucker, Allman Brothers, Wet Willie, all those Southern rock bands that came out of Capricorn, now all that stuff belonged to Polygram Records. And I'd heard through the grapevine that they were gonna the Clapton thing had done so well that they wanted to do the Allman Brothers package. And the brothers were broken up. Dickie had his band, Greg had his band, and there was Sea Level going on and all that stuff. So there was no central management to do this package, but every time the company would talk to somebody, they'd say, "Oh, you need to talk to Kirk West. He's got all that stuff." And,
incredible.
Well, throughout the mid '80s, I had decided I was going to do a book about the Allman Brothers. It was going to be a photographic book, but I didn't shoot Dwayne and Barry, so I had no pictures prior to '73.
Sure.
So I thought, I'll gather everybody else's pictures, So I went to Dickie's house and copied everything he had, and went to Butch's house and copied everything he had. And in the course of trying to accumulate photographs, I also copied everything else they had. And, newspaper articles and copied tapes. I had 5 different formats of tape recorders with me.
Wow.
If somebody had a reel-to-reel or cassettes or something, I could copy it. I wouldn't ever take anything away from anybody's house.
Sure.
I just set up and copy it in the garage or the living room or whatever, So, so by the time Polygram, this was late '88, decided they wanted to do the Allman Brothers, I knew where all the tapes were, whether I had them or not. So I got involved in that, and it came out in '89. It was called the Dreams box set, and used a lot of my photos. I was an associate producer of the whole package, and I would have actually paid people to let me do that. But
yeah,
honestly, I didn't raise my hand and say I'll work for free. So I, okay, I can make a little do in this. So I went out with the band on that tour to be just to be a photographer, to shoot the reunion and all that stuff, because the band decided to get together and promote this 20th anniversary package. And it went so well they decided to do it full time. So when they got back in 1990 with the idea that they were going to do this full time, I shot the album cover for them. I was down there in Criteria, and I went out just to shoot pictures of the next tour. And they hired a guy that they didn't know to be the tour manager, and after 3 days, after a couple weeks of rehearsal and 3 days on the road, they were ready to kill him. Because he was a young fella that thought if he talked loud, he could get Dickie and Butch to move a little faster. And
that's a bad idea, huh?
Oh, bad idea, indeed. So anyway, they hired me to be an assistant tour manager for the rest of that 3-week run. And they said, listen, he ain't going to be talking to us anymore. He wants you to do something. He wants us to do something. He'll tell you, you come tell us, because you know how to talk to people, you know. So they did that. At the end of that 3-week run, they kept me as the assistant, and they hired a guy to be the new tour manager. And I shot pictures along the way, but I never left. You know, that was in the spring of 1990, and I just never left. So,
wow.
And over the course of the next 20 years, because I retired in 2010, but over the next 20 years, I shot the album covers and moved up to be tour manager after a couple of years, and you know, that was my life. That was my career. The photography thing kind of fell by the wayside because I was on the road all the time. So I wasn't in Chicago shooting this or that, and I was still doing all the photography for the band, for the Allman Brothers, but the other part of my photographic career kind of dwindled. And that was fine. You know, I mean, I missed out on a lot of stuff, but I toured the world with my favorite band, so you know, nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, just not to dive into the minutia too much, but when you kind of first, I guess, went to Chicago and then along the way, what kind of I guess photo gear were you using? Was it pretty simple stuff? And I mean, obviously those early days you're shooting on film, which is, I mean, those prints are amazing when I look at them. So
I didn't start shooting digital until about 2005.
Wow.
I was given, you know, when you're out there with a big band, people give you shit all the time, and you don't have to be the guitar player or the singer. You know, I was the guy that could give them passes.
Yeah.
You know, I was easy to reach. So in the very beginning of digital photography, a guy from Kodak was a big fan. He was a sales rep or something. I don't know what he was. He worked for Kodak. And he gave me a camera, digital camera, and it was a lot like a toy. It was like a digital version of a Kodak Brownie. You know, it was like, and it had a removable disc, but it was a 256K disc. That's all the bigger you know. I mean,
wow.
So it was a horrible piece of shit, and I liked it. I tried to give it back to him. He said, no, you keep it. It's yours, you know. And and then I borrowed a couple digital Nikons from a friend of mine to use, and I didn't like that. And, you know, my stuff was all Nikons, and every time, I never bought a new camera. I always bought used gear, because I wasn't a tech hound, you know.
Yeah.
I was a photographer. Wasn't a tech head, so you know, I got an F1, I got F2, F3s, and knicker mats, and you know, all kinds of stuff. I broke down one time and bought a Hasselblad that I really loved. Shot a lot of album covers with that.
Oh, cool.
Oh yeah, the Hasselblad story. I was living on the north side of Chicago, and at the end of the block was a white hen pantry, like an all-night 7-Eleven kind of deal.
Oh.
And so about midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, I need to go get something. So I walk down the block, go to the 7-Eleven, or the white hen pantry, and guy behind the counter that I knew, he says, listen, you're a photographer, right? And I said, yeah. He says, I got a friend here that's got a camera he needs to sell. I go, okay, all right. Have him bring it over. So I come back the next night, and the guy's there, and it's a Hasselblad 500C with 2 lenses and 2 backs, and you know, a Polaroid back, all kinds of stuff. He says he needs $1,000. He needs it in cash, and he needs it tonight. I go, okay, I know what kind of deal I know what we got going here. So I said, I can't do that. You need it tonight. I got $500 for you. He says, okay, I'll take it. so I made that $500 back the next week. So it was like, and finally I sold that thing. I had quit using film, like I said, in the late aughts, and a kid came to the gallery about 4 years ago, said, I want to own one of your film cameras. I said, why? He said, because you shot all this wonderful stuff. I want the camera that you did that with. And I said, well, shit, okay. So I sold him the hot spot.
Wow.
But anyway, so the gear that I had was, they were tools. They weren't something to keep polished and shiny.
Right.
By the time I upgraded to the next camera, none of the light meters worked. You drop a camera on a concrete floor, it was, you learn light. I didn't need light meters.
Right.
I knew when light changed, you had to adjust. And I knew what hot yellows would need to be and greens. And, so I didn't take care of my gear very well, number one. But they were not shelf items. They were working items, so.
I kind of find, for myself, I shoot a lot of stuff on film as well, and I have a couple of digital cameras too, but it seems to really, it teaches you how to be, I think, a photographer. Not that I'm anywhere near a professional photographer. Those skills that you have to learn in order to shoot on film, or you really think about those shots before you take them instead of just popping off 100 shots a second, Yeah. No,
photography used to be like magic, especially in the darkroom. Those things that was, the whole thing was magic. And now, there are people that do nothing but shoot with iPhones. And it's amazing photography.
Yeah.
But, when you've got 36 pictures on your roll of film, and you won't know if you got it until you get home and process it, that you have to, it demands that you do the thing the right way.
Yeah.
Now I got a D700 Nikon that I bought years ago, and I can go out there and shoot 1,000 pictures in a night, and what's the point? It just doesn't make sense to me, really.
Yeah.
But I'm an old dog. I'll turn 70 next week, and so I'm not a fast adapter to things, and I'm okay with that. And I got a buddy here in town who is a very good photographer, not a professional. He's a total tech freak, and I don't even like to have conversations about that sort of thing. So anyway, there I go.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I've just, I kind of go backwards a lot, and I just picked up some expired Fuji film for a land camera, and that pack of 10 cost me about $70 or $80. So
sure.
Every single shot that I've taken one shot, and it's had film in it for a week. So I'm picking my shots, I'm checking my lights, I'm making sure everything's just the way I want it, I really like that analog feel, and that's why I love your pictures. I was looking through some of your stuff, and like the Freddie Fender pictures and the Lowell George and Bob Marley. That stuff's incredible.
Thank you, man.
That's just so fantastic. So, and then the other thing I kind of wanted to dive into a little bit was just I think a lot of people kind of know the story of the big house and how it happened, but did you, were you, as you said, you were kind of already collecting a lot of stuff along the way anyway, but once you bought the big house, I guess, how did that kind of all come about?
Well, okay, during one of my trips south from Chicago, a research trip for the book project that I was doing in the 80s, I came through Macon, and nobody in the band was living in Macon anymore, although J-Mo was in and out of Macon. He was mostly in Atlanta, but I came by, and the big house was empty. Nobody was living there, and it was for sale. So I just called the realtor and said, listen, I'm looking at, I want to look at this house. I want to see about it. And they said, okay. So they were trying to show me. And so I took pictures of the entire house, every room, inside and out, the property, everything, acting like I was a diligent buyer. So that was about 87, 88, something like that. But, you know, I had no intentions of buying the house. I didn't own anything but cameras and a used Subaru. And but I had the pictures. So a number of years later, after I was working for the band, this would have been 92, I think, there was a little outfit down here in Macon called the Georgia Allman Brothers Band Association. Basically, it was a fan club.
Sure, yep, I follow them.
And so they were having their, I think it was the second Gabba Fest, little fan gathering at a hotel here in Macon. And I and a buddy of mine from Chicago drove down with a minivan filled with T-shirts and posters and some of my photographs, but mostly it was just tour swag and stuff, you know. There was no legitimate fan club. The band had just been together a 3 years at that point again, and so I drove down here with my buddy, and while we were down here in Macon, Chank Middleton, Greg's best, oldest buddy, was hanging, and he said, listen, you want to go through the big house? I said, sure, man. Well, at that time, there was a African-American family. He was a lawyer, she was a school teacher, and they had 3 or 4 kids. So Chank and a couple other fans did a little walking tour. Mama Louise went with us, and so we went through the house, and the wife, the woman in the house, was really wonderful, warm, and gracious, and her husband was a real jackass. And but the whole time, the house was in really bad shape. And we were there about a half hour, 45 minutes, looked through every room up to the 3rd floor and back down and all that. The woman in the house kind of made all these gestures, these comments, these asides that somebody that knew the history or had the money or whatever. I came away thinking that she was trying to sell me the house.
Oh.
And Chank said the same thing. He says, I think Louise wants you to, Helen wants you to buy this house. I said, okay. So and I had just been married. I got married in 91. So I come home from that little trip and tell my wife that, you know, and we were looking. She was a high-powered business executive in the insurance industry, and I was me. You know, so our lives didn't blend all that well. She had a whole different lifestyle. She was a huge music fan, and I had met her through a personals ad that an old girlfriend of mine had written for me. And so I pulled out the proof sheets from years ago and showed her the house. She says, oh my God, Kirk, oh my God, this could be our future. And I'd never owned anything bigger than a Subaru. And she'd owned several houses and renovated them, and she'd been married a couple times that I never had. So I said, well, look, maybe that's our future. She said, let's go there and open a bed and breakfast. Oh, okay, I'm good. You know, I'm on the road. You can do that. We'll be there. So we go down in January of 93 and meet the folks and look through the house. And like I said, the wife was a lovely woman, and her husband was a jackass. Mm-hmm. And he told us, sitting in the back porch, he said, now, there's people in this town who want to get my ass out of this house. They know what this house is worth. They know what the history is. They don't want somebody like me in this house. They want somebody like you in this house. And, you know, what do you say? You go, okay. So he said, I'll tell you what, this is the price I want. And if you don't give me the price, I'm going to let this house fall down around my shoulders.
Wow.
And the money he wanted was twice what we had. So, okay, well, we can deal. Let's see what we can do. So we get an appraiser, and it appraises for half of what he wanted. And oh man, this isn't going to work. But he was right. There was a mortgage company that gave us a loan, a construction loan. We couldn't get a real mortgage, so we bought it and gave the guy what he wanted. And he went out and bought another house for his family and paid off the mortgage. Actually, in one of our visits, the wife said, "Look, why don't you just rent a house, move down here?" She says, "Because we're going bankrupt, and you'll be able to buy this house on the courthouse steps."
Wow.
For what it's worth. I says, "Helen, I don't want to do that. I don't want to steal this house from you people.
Yeah.
You know, and so we did it the right way, and so we took ownership of it in late summer of '93. And the whole idea was that we were going to be in Macon 5 years, open a little rock and roll bed and breakfast, have 3 rooms available to the public, you know, to stay in,
Sure.
and have 2 rooms downstairs that housed the collection. We called it the archive rooms.
Ah.
And you know, we found out right away once we got down here that city building codes and zoning ordinances essentially prohibited a bed and breakfast. So, okay, we'll figure it out. We just won't charge anybody. We'll put a donation box there, you know, and that's what we did. That was in the summer of '93, and about, I guess it would have been about 2004 or 5, a little over 10 years, my wife decided that she was tired of Macon, that she was tired. We never had the money to get the house completely the way she wanted it. It was fine for me. It was the first house I'd ever owned, and it was a big, beautiful place, you know. And but a couple of the rooms we never did get renovated, and it turned into a business operation because we had started Hitting the Note magazine and a little mail order merch company. So we had a lot of stuff going on, and at some point, about 5 years in, we realized that we were getting really committed to staying in Macon. We bought the house next door that became available. It was a big old gorgeous Victorian. We turned that into the business house. We moved the magazine and the merch company next door and let the young hippies that we had hired to work with us. We had 3 or 4 people living there at the house next door. So we had a little hippie commune kind of deal going on. And Kirsten got tired and decided, and I was gone all the time. I was tour managing Government Mule and the Brothers. So it was 3 years I was almost not home at all. So we started looking around to have somebody buy. We had these 2 houses. I was trying to sell both houses and the collection to somebody that wanted to do what we were doing. And we found a couple guys that really loved the whole idea, but neither one of their wives wanted to leave Charlottesville, Virginia, or Akron, Ohio. You know, I mean,
wow. So
I can understand not wanting to leave Charlottesville, but why the hell you want to stay in Akron? You know, but between the 2 of them, they came up with some great ideas. And so we formed a 501c3 nonprofit, Big House Foundation, started raising tax-exempt money to redo the house and turn it into a full-blown museum. And that's what we ended up doing. We sold the house and the collection to the foundation in 2007 and moved out. And it was then that we started, because in order to turn it from a private home with some with some loopholes, so because we had over 20,000 people knock on the door when we lived there. The
Wow.
14 years we were there, we had over 20 grand knocking on the door. And so we closed it up, moved out, and rebuilt the whole house. Put in a whole new air conditioning system, replaced all the windows. There were 70-some windows in the house. And we got a lot of people. A contractor from New York State came down with his whole crew and put on a roof and all the windows. And we had tons of people contributing. And then we raised a lot of money. We raised $4 million to do this.
Wow.
And $3 million of it came from friends of mine on Wall Street. Allman Brothers were huge in New York City, and these Wall Street guys were the best. You know, they loved the brothers. They had grown up listening to them all through college, and these guys were like millionaires now. You know, so they'd hold benefits where we'd raise $300,000 in one night, shit like that. So the Wall Street guys, they may be cowboys, but they loved the Allman Brothers, and they were stand-up characters. So
wow, fascinating.
So that's how that whole thing came together, and now the Big House Foundation runs it. I kind of do a little this and that for them. We went in a couple years ago and photographed the entire collection of memorabilia, guitars, clothes, paperwork, all that stuff. And we did a book last year, came out early this year, called The Big House Collection, and it's the pick of the litter, it's of the best of the collection. And, so that's it. They're doing well. It's a big tourist attraction here in Macon, and I'm very proud of it, but we go over every now and then and just kind of hang out a bit, but I didn't want to be the retired boxer that stands at the front door greeting.
Sure. I was down there 5 years ago maybe, and stopped in and talked to Richard, and Willie came by and gave me a tour, and it was a really great experience. So that's about the time I started really learning the history about your involvement with it. So that to me was just incredible that someone can come out of Iowa and just have that kind of impact on something that I love so much, music, photography, the Allman Brothers. It's all kind of everything cool all wrapped into one little spot.
I like it like that. You bet.
And so kind of the last thing I'll touch on before I let you go is your gallery there in Macon. When did you open that up and get that started?
Well, that happened about 5 years ago. It would have been, I think it was 5 years ago this past February, I believe. I had done a couple little gallery shows, one here in Macon, one in Jackson, Mississippi, and then a buddy of mine from Baltimore got me hooked up doing festivals, selling pictures in these little artist tents at the music festivals and stuff.
Oh.
I did that for a couple summers. I don't camp, and Locken or Mountain Jam, they're all out in the middle of nowhere. and I, like I said, I'm not a camper, so we'd have to drive 45 minutes to get to a hotel and every day. So, and I thought, this is fun, but it turns out that I like hippies in small doses, and and there I was standing underneath a sign that had my name on it and had no ability to split. Oh, gotta go. Greg's, so we decided. I said, let's. I tell you what, let's do. Greg used to come down here and play Macon for a week every January. There's a little space open downtown, and we knew the landlady, and we thought we'd do a little pop-up for Christmas. And the renovation, we were the first tenants in this building, and it just didn't work out. It took too long. So we were just going to do a 60-day pop-up, and it ended up being a full-blast deal. Well, hell, let's give it a shot. And it turned out pretty well. And Kirsten's a great party planner. And it's her business. It's my photography, but it's her business. And so, we did well and had little monthly music events. We got a little corner stage in the place. And so, it was a cool scene, but it wasn't a young hipster scene. It was like for old dogs like us. And, so it worked really well. And a lot of traffic. It's become quite a destination between it's only a couple blocks from the Capricorn studio that they've reopened.
Yeah.
And it's a mile from the Big House, and it's just down the street from the H&H. So everything is, we got this whole, we're on the circuit, we're on, you come to Macon, you go to the Big House, you go to Capricorn, you go to the H, you go to Grant's, you go to Gallery West. So
yep.
Now we've been closed primarily since March, because I'd had a couple years of bad health, bad heart attack with quad bypass, and intestinal issues, and pneumonia. I got all kinds of stuff. So we were getting ready to do this Brothers show in New York, and I hadn't worked for the band since 2010. Although I did go out with this outfit called the Brayers that Butch and James put together.
You bet.
That was in 2016, I think. And so that was the first time I'd actually been out touring again. It was a lot of fun, but I also realized that I'd lost a step or two. So this thing turned out to be, this thing in New York was going to be my, let's just see how much stamina I got. Let's see what I can do. And I was going up to document and photograph everything and do a 3-day book signing, meet and greet sale of my photography and books. And everything went great. The concert was spectacular. And I caught COVID and came home with it and was sick as a damn dog.
Wow.
And we haven't had the gallery open since March. We did open on Father's Day weekend and did really well. But then the COVID kicked up again down here and people got freaked out. So
yeah.
What Kirsten, she's actually at the gallery today. I was just over there this morning and signed some more prints and stuff. And we're going to open on Fridays and Saturdays now to see how it goes, The Big House and Capricorn are both open. They've closed Grants for the time being because the bars can't be open. We'll see. She's going to be over there Fridays and Saturdays for the foreseeable future and see how it plays. We're redoing the website. We're putting all the we're doing a website that'll include all the books and the gallery and my photography. So we'll kind of gear up for maybe doing primarily internet sales. We'll see. So it's a fun thing. It's a great little deal in Macon. We've created, Kirsten and I have made our mark here in Macon between the house and the gallery, and we used to promote shows all the time, clubs and concerts and stuff. So, our 5 years, we're screwed down here for life, and we love it.
Oh, that's wonderful.
I'll tell you what, man, it's a small town. I was just down there, and I don't hardly ever go out just because it's dangerous for me, and we're not supposed to go out. We're supposed to lay low and protect ourselves and your neighbors. And but I'm walking a couple blocks around downtown, and 2 or 3 people, hey, Kirk, how you been? Yeah. So it's nice to have that kind of connection to your home. So, and living in Chicago or San Francisco, it wouldn't have been like that. So,
right. Yeah, that's incredible. I'm super glad that I got a chance to talk to you today. I'm glad you're healthy and getting back on the mend. And I just hope you continue putting out books because, man, your photography is really like it's like a guidebook for me on what I should be doing.
Wow, cool. I'm glad to hear that. Right on, man. Well, thank you so much for your interest, and I look forward to seeing how it all plays out.
All right. Thank you so much. I hope you and your wife stay healthy, and hopefully I'll get back down there soon to see you guys.
Good deal, brother, man. Okay.
All right. See you, Kirk. Bye.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
You too. Thank you so much to Kirk and Kirsten West for all of their contributions to the Allman Brothers Band. I'd encourage you to visit their website, www.gallerywestmacon.com, where you can see a number of Kirk's photographs, order prints, or grab copies of either of his 2 books. Those books are The Blues in Black and White, and that covers Kirk's photography in Chicago during the 70s and 80s, and his other book, Les Brayers, which is a photographic journey with the members of the Allman Brothers Band and contains over 900 photographs. Thanks again to both of my sponsors, Pure Mountain Coffee and Black Cat Bone Productions, for their continued support. More incredible interviews are in the works as we speak, so stay tuned and I will catch up with you all down the road.